very often we get feedback from founders, whether we invest in them or not, that you guys are different. What they say is the way you guys ask questions, the way you respect the founder, the way you dig deep in trying to understand certain things, just ask questions that have never been asked before.
What's up, everybody? In today's segment, Mark Mullen will be sharing the origin stories of Mull Capital, M Partners, and Bonfire Ventures, as well as giving tips for a successful investment strategy. I want to transition us into that VC world because, if you look at your LinkedIn, there's obviously Mull Capital, and then there's M Partners, and then Bonfire. And so, can you kind of Mull Capital started late 90s. So was that more of angel investing? Was that a traditional fund? And how do you think about, let's leave Bonfire out, but just when it comes to Mull Capital and M Partners, what exactly is those two funds, and how did they come to be from working with the Daniels team?
When you're in your 30s and you're making investments like I was, and I got married when I was 35, so you're just not really focused on, you write a check and it's in my name, fine. And now we have investment in my name, but now I have a family, now you want to start to build an estate, stuff like that. But I made an investment in my buddy's company, and it had a huge return.
The first one that you helped to buy the server.
They bought the server back. They paid me for the server 15%. They paid me the warrants. The company goes public. Those warrants are worth, and I sold all the warrants in the stock market. So I made all this money. I was just telling my dad. And then I did another investment that did really well. And I think just naturally we started talking about, he's like, well, God, I'd like to, can I make an investment with you?
Your pops?
Yeah. Can I make an investment? Not with me.
Yeah.
It was with me, yes, but can I?
He wants in.
I want to, yeah, bro. That's a good return. Can we make an investment? And so I said, well, why don't we start an investment company? We'll call it Mull Capital, because everybody calls me Mull. He calls me Mull Jr., which is cute. But always no one calls him Mull. I was like, no one calls you Mull. Everybody calls him D, which his name's Dennis, and everybody calls him D. So they call me Mull. So we just kind of silly.
Yeah.
Mull Capital cool. LLC. And we set it up so that if we ever wanted to make an investment in a company, let's just say we put $5,000 in, he put $2,500 and I put $2,500.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we structured it is because I was finding the investments and working them. I took all the carry after I paid him back 3x.
Cool.
Okay. So we didn't know that was actually going to be a great stipulation in the deal. And so that kind of launched us into having this entity, which had, 8 or 9 investments that we made over a 4 or 5 year period. It wasn't like we were prolific because I was still at Daniels, having a day job, and he had his stuff. And so we did some investments over time. And one of the first people we invested in was 2 investments we made. And I'd like to tie this back to Bonfire, but so that was Mull Capital. Then when we sold the firm to RBC Capital Markets, and I stayed for 3 years, at the end of that, I started a company called M Capital Inc. And that was because I was being asked to advise various companies on M&A strategy. So I was kind of like a banker without being a banker. I was okay. But and then I was getting paid. And so I set up an entity, an Inc., to be able to have a little IRA. And, because when I left RBC and I went to work for the government, I didn't have a job, on purpose. I was never going to work for anybody else. I hadn't decided that I was going to start the venture capital thing. So I was doing this advising on the side, and that's why I started M Capital. So when I went to start when I went to start the fund, it was kind of natural to say M Partners LP. That's how it started. So that's the difference between all those entities.
Yeah.
Mull Capital invested in 2 companies in particular. One, 1998, we talked about this. I went to Toronto to try to buy a company called Interlog. Interlog was the second largest ISP in Canada.
How did you hear about these guys?
We were hired by a company called Vario, which was a private equity backed ISP who was doing a roll up around the world. And they eventually went public, and they were bought by NTT for $5 billion. I went to Toronto, met these 2 guys who were brothers. One was 16, one was 20, one was 16, one was 22. They had somehow built the second largest ISP in Canada, but again, this was early days. And I tried to buy them on behalf of this client. And we got second place. So they ended up getting bought at a higher price by somebody else. But I developed a great relationship with these guys because I myself was like 28. I was like 20, whatever the age was, I could get along with them. And even though they were much younger. And so we became friends. And then they hired me to help them raise money for their next company. So even though we weren't able to buy their company, they sold it and then they hired me to raise money for the next company, which we raised money and then we sold it to AT&T Canada.
Wow.
And then their next company was a company called 1-800-Flowers. They sold to 1-800-Flowers. But their next company, a company called Ping, and that was a Mull Capital investment. Now, Ping goes on to sell to
1-800-Flowers.
Doesn't make a lot of money. No big deal. And we are just buddies now. We snowboard a lot together. We're just part of my friend group in the world.
Yeah.
And then I start Double M Partners. I actually got him a job. His name's Lorian. I get Lorian a job at one of my other investments. Was also a client of mine called Message Labs. And Message Labs sold for $800 million to Symantec. And so that was a huge win for Daniels, a huge win for Mull Capital, a huge win for me, et cetera, and a huge win for the founders of that company. But they had hired Lorian to be their head of BD because they were looking for somebody in America because they're an English company. I'm like, you gotta talk to my guy, Lorian. And they became friends and Lorian made a bunch of money. So we're all friends. And then so he invested in Double M Partners. He invested in both those funds. And then fast forward to 2017, he's now married. He's got a kid. He's thinking about moving to LA. He's going to come out and hang out for a while. Can I use your office? Comes out, spends a couple of months here, uses my office here in Santa Monica. And we're just pals. We start talking about what he's going to do next. And he's like, well, I want to set up this, my brother, we've gotten into crypto. He was back early, et cetera. And I want to set up a fund to invest in crypto. So I'm like, done, let's do it. And I'll get Bonfire to put some money in. And so we started working on that. And then in the process of deciding what he was going to focus on the crypto side, they decide to start a company.
In the Web3
space. In the Web3 space. And that company is called Figment, Figment.io. We led the seed round in, and then we led the A round in, and they just closed their C round at 1.4 billion. So, okay, so I just took you on a 23-year arc with a relationship that I've had that long, and I'm on the board, and this has been fun because the company is performing extremely well. It's very valuable, very sought after, and it's a Bonfire company.
Yeah.
It's a Bonfire, and it's across our growth fund and our core fund. That goes all the way back to a Mull Capital investment that we did in Ping. And then the second one we did is in a company called Edgecast, which was started by Alex Casarani here in LA. I had known Alex for the same reasons. We tried to buy his company, then we were hired to sell his company as bankers. And then we actually snowboarded together. We became buddies, or skied. And then he started a company, sold it, moved to LA coincidentally. We both had moved here at the same time. We're catching up and getting to know each other again.
Families, yeah.
Our wives know each other. He's like, I'm thinking about starting a company. And he and his co-founders here, James Siegel here in LA, they have known each other they had built these other two companies before together. And they were iterating on a bunch of different ideas, making plant boxes, making computers, security, blah, blah. And they come up and they decide to start a company called Edgecast, which was a CDN back in 2007. If you remember Limelight and Akamai, and I'm like, really? You're going to compete with those guys? Yeah, we have a different model. 6 years later, they sell it for $400 million to Verizon, Mull Capital investment. So my dad's like, man, this is great.
This is easy.
This stuff is great.
I should have been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah. But so then Alex sells in 2013. He has a 2 years where he has to stay with Verizon. Comes out 2015. Now he's an investor in both Double M funds. And he and James are starting to think about their next startup. And in 2017, they started a new startup called OpenPath, and Bonfire invests. And then they sold that last year to Motorola for $400 million. So
wow,
these are the type of things that Jim and I and Brett have access to because because of the experience we've had, because of those relationships we've built and kept and maintained with what we consider superstar founders. And so it's almost incestuous in some ways because we're all investors in each other's stuff. They invested in my funds, I invested in their companies.
Yeah.
But we're all part of the same community. And by the way, Alex Casarani, they've now started and sold 4 companies. He's like a superstar entrepreneur. Like he advises my companies. I mean, you want to talk about somebody you can put your shoulder on. He knows how to operate and build a company way, way, way better than I do. And now he's part of our team.
Yeah. I mean, you just have such a vibe of like chop wood, carry water, like hard work, beat the drum. And like, I think it's like your experience in your years, but like it's your reputation over those years, and where people are like, you're so dependable over the longevity of 2 decades that it's like, why wouldn't people want to be invested in your fund?
So if you're erratic and you're not honest, and Tyler and I always joke, not Tyler and I, but when one of my founders will say, this is recently, it's like, first quarter was this, and this, and it was great. I'm like, yeah, I know, it's great. And you're telling the truth. Because when we're trying to raise money, there's always this like, you're trying to sell.
Yeah.
But he's like, we grew 76% in the first quarter, and we had upsells, and we hired a new team, and I'm like, and you're not even bullshitting. Like it's easier to tell the truth. And so this kind of goes back to your earlier question, maybe about being an only child. It's like keeping these relationships for 23 years and 22 years with Alex and Lorian, and they just keep paying off for both of us over and over and over. And it was never the point to make money off of each other. That's not the point. It's just like, boy, you want to talk about, like if Alex calls me tomorrow, or Lorian, I've always said this, if they want to start a paperclip company, I'm in a paperclip company. Like, doesn't matter. Like if you want to sell hamburgers, we're in.
See, like, it's so cool. I'm going to bring this back full circle on the only child thing. Because to me, it's
When's
like,
this over with? No,
yeah. No, we're wrapping soon, but I just think it's like crazy that in this like weird way, like you've become like the friends that you would go and they'd take you into their family. It's like, you're like bringing them into the family now, and you're like, oh, you've got this great idea. Let me introduce to these people. Let's have dinner together. Let's like get to know each other. And it's cool how it like transitioned from like you in that, role of like going to people's houses to now you're like, come to my house and like, let me help foster your guys' growth.
Yeah.
Couple more questions on Bonfire, and then I'll get you out of here. Talk to me about the types of startups that you love to invest in. I know you guys are B2B focused, but can you kind of like, are they pre-seed? Are they seed? I know you have several different funds. So bring us into the world of Bonfire. And I got to know too, quick origin story on you and Jim. Like, how did you guys get together? How did like, how did that
What do you
happen?
want to know first?
Let's start with the origin story of Bonfire. Like, how did you guys come together?
So you'd have to, have a snapshot of what 2011, 12 were like. There was Crosscut and Upfront and Greycroft and just a few other, more of an angel community. There wasn't like a lot of VCs, et cetera. Jim was here. He had his own fund family called Rincon Venture Partners.
That's right.
He lived in Santa Barbara, where his wife is from. Brett now lives in Santa Barbara, where his wife is from. You've got the pattern. My wife from here. We're all, and he had been investing for quite some time. He had been at a bigger fund before. Both he and Brett are big Ivy League guys, super smart, et cetera. And Jim had been investing in B2B software. And so that seemed kind of weird because there were only a few firms at all in LA. And he was one of those that was doing the same thing I was. He had a little bit more money, but we were basically participating. A lot of people participated in each other's deals back then.
Got it.
Like Crosstalk.
So you guys knew each other from
essentially, I guarantee we'd see each other at an SVB cocktail party or a Cooley luncheon. All the community was so small then, we saw each other a lot. And we also were finding ourselves on the same cap table because there were only so many companies raising money in B2B software in Southern California. So we found ourselves on similar cap tables and maybe in the boardroom. And because it's a unique small community, and he's, in my opinion, a great guy, a nice person. Like, why we were friendly. We're just friendly. And then we started to share deal flow because we were both sole GPs. Why not? I shared deal flow with Brett Brewer and Mark Suster, and like we're all friends. And so Jim and I started sharing deal flow and ideas. And we started talking actually about partnering, because the only way to scale a venture capital fund is with people, not necessarily money. You know, it's just shocking to me, some of the sole GPs raising more and more money. Maybe our style is we get very involved with our companies, so we can't do that.
Yeah.
The only way to scale is with people. And there's two ways to do that. One is bring on a partner. And that partner is either someone who's a junior partner who you think you're going to teach, or it's someone who's a peer. And in order to bring on a peer, imagine this conversation that I just went through of me. I'm never going to work for anybody again. I just worked for a famous, incredible man. I'm not partnering with anybody.
Just anybody. Or anybody.
Right at the time. Like that was kind of the mentality. So if you were to bring on a peer, which is what has transpired, you really have to make and hope it works, because we're not 26-year-olds anymore where we can make a mistake. When you make a mistake in a partnership relationship now, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. It's like two lone wolves coming together.
So we started talking, and we ended up having, coincidentally and luckily, an LP who is today our largest LP in all of our funds, but back then was just a small LP in our funds, who was introduced to us by Upfront, just to show you how the community has worked in the past. We started talking to him independently, saying, "Hey, I think I really like Jim, and I presume, Jim, if you're listening, you said you liked Mark, but right? So we might partner together." And he said, "If you guys partner, I want to be the biggest investor." So he gave us a huge boost of encouragement, to perhaps do this.
Wow.
And then Foundry Group, if you know Foundry from Boulder, they actually have a big fund of funds group. And Lyndall Aikman was just building that and was getting to know each of Jim and I independently. And he was not of the mind of backing sole GPs. So he's like, "Man, I like what you guys are doing," or "I like what you're doing, Mullen." He didn't know anything about Jim. "I like what you're doing, but are you going to keep grinding like this?" And he thought I had a very successful career at Daniels. Like, am I actually going to work for my founders? Right. And I don't know about you being alone. Like, how are you going to build your team? And then I said, "Well, I'm actually talking to somebody about partnering." And then me being a banker is like, "Who?" And I'm like, "I'm not telling you anything." Like, "Who are you?" Like, you haven't given me money. You haven't given me. And so Jim was having the same conversation with him, and I had lunch with him at
the same person.
Yes, because he runs their fund of funds, so he's making decisions on who to invest in as funds. And I remember having lunch with he and his partner Jacqueline over at the Fairmont restaurant, whatever, the Fig.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there, and they're kind of just drilling into me. This is the first week of December of 2016. And I was like, "Well, who are you going to partner with? Like, you got to partner. Like, we want to back you, but like, you got to give us a partner that's actually going to work." I'm like, "Okay." So I'm just going to tell you, like, Jim Adelman and I are thinking about partnering. He's like, you guys partner. We're backing that."
You had like signals coming.
So
from
we
multiple,
had two guys who were actually going to write us checks, say it. And I remember calling Jim after the meeting, like, "Here's what was said." And we're like, well, we better figure this out. And as it turns out, I think my daughter was on the snowboard team at Mammoth, so I was going there almost every other weekend.
Wow.
And he lives there. He was living there every winter.
Mammoth?
Winter, yeah. Well, he'd be traveling back and forth,
sure.
But his family was up there. And so I know it sounds now kind of funny in hindsight. We literally went skiing. We literally shook hands on a chairlift.
No freaking way.
We talked about it on the chairlift, said, "Okay, we're doing this 50-50, done." That was it.
Wow.
So what was happening was I was raising money already for Fund 3. And I basically had a bunch of money raised, called everybody up.
Said, "I'm bringing a superstar on."
This is all positive for you. Some people didn't think of it that way because they didn't know Jim. They're just like,
"Who's this
I don't
person?"
Like this,
yeah.
Mullen,
I know Mullen.
I don't know about you, man. I don't know if you can take on anybody. No. And so they all committed to invest in the new fund, which was now going to become Bonfire 1, which we hadn't named till June. So we actually shook hands in December, closed 4 investments.
No name. They
were all closed under double M3. All with the caveat, we were changing our name, Jim and our partner, and the money was coming in. We were structuring as we went. So for 6 months there, we didn't have agreements. We didn't have paper. He and I really trusted each other. And so that obviously built a great bond.
Wow,
in 6 months. And then once we got everything set up, the big investors came in, right? The big guns. They were the more institutional people who wouldn't like send me money without actually having an agreement, right?
Yeah.
So that's how it started.
Wow.
Yeah. So 6 months later,
origin story.
6 months later, after like 190 names we were trying to figure out and getting our wives and children's opinions on the names and logos, and you had to buy the domain name, all that stuff, we came up with Bonfire. And wow, that name has really turned out to be a great name, to be honest. Both our swag, as people say, but just everybody remembers Bonfire. I remember my buddy, Brian, who was my mentor under Bill Daniels, who's an investor and everything. First thing he says to me is, he goes, "I can't wait to read the headlines. Your first company goes out of business. Lights up in a bonfire. Money burns up in a bonfire." I'm like, come on, man. Like, right. So that's how it started. So tough love is always there for everybody.
Wow.
And, my dad's an investor and that's been fun. So
epic origin
that's how we got
story.
together. Yep.
Last couple questions around your investments and just like who you like to invest in. For those listening, and that, obviously if you're in the B2B software worlds, I'm sure they've heard of Bonfire, heard of you. Who's your, crypto we can talk about on our next podcast with you sometime, but like who do you like to see? What size checks are you typically like, are you leading rounds? Bring us into kind of just like what that perfect investment looks like.
Yeah. Just to give you the thing on the crypto, like that's software. Right. We invest in picks and shovels. We do not invest in consumer facing opportunities. Right. So when we invest in Figment, they're software and
for sure
solutions for other businesses to trade in crypto, to do business in crypto. And so with that caveat, we're looking for the picks and shovels types of companies. And what's interesting, when you're 22 and you're coming out of college and you're an entrepreneur and you want to start a company, you kind of don't start a B2B software company, right? It's not the first thing you try. Some have done it and tried. It's just not maybe that exciting. Like I want to start this new app that's gonna, whatever. But over time, we find that the really skilled founders, they love to try their will at B2B. So we are very focused, right? So we always say 8 to 10 deals, and I'm telling you, like the last 2 years we did 9. Okay, so we do 8 to 10 deals every year. We lead 9 of those 10. So we do the work. And so that's why I'm saying, like when all of us are asking questions and getting deep, it's not because we're about to throw a 500. I'm not opposed to this. This is what I used to do at Double M. We're not going to throw a $500,000 check in with somebody else leading. No, with Mark from Greycroft leading.
Yeah, you're like putting the jersey on, and
we're doing the work. We're getting involved, and that's fine. And so that's the area we focus on. We're writing between $2 and $3 million checks. That's
wow,
we
even
want
at the
seed
round
on our first check. Well, that's the reason I have a range now is because seed round sizes have changed in range.
Wow, so much.
The traditional. If you went to Fund 1, our first check was about 1.3 average, right? That's a 1.3 average check in a $2.5 to $3 million seed round, $2 to $3 million seed round. And we're writing the bigger check, and we're trying to get 10 to 15%. In this last fund, it hasn't gone up dramatically. The first check size is about 1.6, but I think the size of the rounds are going from 2.5 to 4. And really, in the last 6 months, there's been this kind of $4 to $6 million seed rounds. And the really hard part for all of this and for us is that it suggests that people are establishing their valuation based on the amount of money they're raising. So if you're saying, well, I only want to raise $2 million, so I'm going to raise 2 at 8 pre. We have $20,000 in revenue, yeah, right. And they say, but all of a sudden they're like, we're being pushed, so we're going to raise $4 million, and we're going to raise it at 16 pre. I'm like, wait, but nothing happened. You have no more revenue than you had last week, but you've doubled the size of the now that's market situation, which is allowing that to happen,
because of like the soft things and like,
just, or not
just
environment,
names,
the environment. And so now we're getting to these $6 million rounds. And so we're sticking to our mantra. We're being We only do that many deals. We're trying to be very careful. We love, if we can, to spend time with the founding team to allow them time to choose us. We're not going to, we lose deals because we don't pay the highest price. That's life. And we're going to continue losing deals because I won't pay the highest price. We will pay the highest price. We have paid the highest price in deals that we've won. I'm just saying, like, we will lose more than not because there's a pricing mechanism that just doesn't make sense for us. And so we're trying to stay really focused on those. So that's the type of companies we invest in. We have no we intend to invest in about a third of our companies, 30 to 40% will be in Southern California. So we still have a Southern California angle, but because of COVID but just because the environment has really opened up for all of us, both sides are now okay with doing deals without meeting each other.
Yeah.
And that's happened, and we all know, over the last 2 years. And so that has opened up the talent marketplace. It's opened up a lot of diversity, a lot of opportunities in different places. Like now we have deals in New Orleans. We have 3 in Denver. We have 3 in Seattle. We have 2 in Chicago. We didn't have those deals 3 years ago.
Do you look at like this new strategy for you as like, oh shit, for me at least, we were only hiring people in Los Angeles, and then COVID, and it's like, oh, well, maybe we'll hire people from outside of LA. And it's like, wow, I didn't even realize the opportunity. Do you feel like it's like there's this new world out there, or does it make you wish that you were still just like hyper focused? It's
mixed. It's definitely a new world out there that's for the better, right? So it's opening up venture capital lanes for a lot of entrepreneurs who doesn't matter where they're from. Like I used to make not a joke, but I like to get close with my founders. I like to have a relationship with them.
Sure.
And that takes some sort of physical relationship or, meeting. And if you went back 4 years ago when we did Fund 1 was 64% in LA, which was our focus. We're really we were a Southern California focused firm. I used to say, look, if somebody calls me from an incubator in Atlanta, I'm not flying to Atlanta. I don't know anybody there. I don't have the network there,
right,
which I've talked about today. I don't have relationships there. How am I going to build a rapport with this founder? And then how am I going to manage with that founder being available if she's in Atlanta and I'm here in LA? It's just not going to work.
Totally.
And guess what? We now have 2 companies in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Now that's what I mean by that. There's an acceptance from both sides that this actually can happen.
Yeah.
So that's opened up a lot of opportunities for us and the founders to get access to more capital outside of their home market. But it does, this last 3 years in venture is going to take a while to play out.
Mark, last question. What are you most excited about? So it could be business, could be family, could be personal. What right now are you just like the most energized and excited about?
I'm now getting to that sad moment where I have 1 kid leaving the house this summer.
You got this, man.
And, and my little guy who's now almost 16, going through that process, but that's also really interesting and fun and growth. And he's really into crypto and stuff like that. So we're having good conversations. My wife has never been in a better situation. She's in the Sunday company of the Groundlings.
Oh, wow.
She performs every Sunday and she loves it. So family's in a great spot, which allows me to be really excited about what we're doing with Bonfire. We're about to announce, a couple new funds. And the team's never been better. The team's never been bigger. We're adding some more people. And our reputation, I think, has been growing. We've had a really good run the last 3 years. And so I think that we're now in a position to start to capitalize on it. Like we're in a good spot to be in a front row seat, or at least a good seat, to see what's going to happen over the next 10 years. And so I'm really excited for having that opportunity to be there, while it's really exciting to see what's happening in the markets and stuff like that. Now, of course, let's set aside world hunger and Ukraine and everything that's happening. But, I was saying to my son, who asked about 6 months ago, he's like, why is crypto so shady? And I said, well, what's your favorite movie? And he said, Wolves of Wall Street. I'm like, okay, so Wall Street is shady too. Like it's just some characters inside of those markets make it seem shady, but it's extremely exciting. What I think is going to transform over the next 20 years. I only wish I was your age, is what I said to my son. what's going to happen the next 20 years is just out of this world in terms
Wow.
of, and the only reason I guess what informs me on that is what's happened in the last 10, just dramatic. Right. And so we'll see. I don't have any opinion on the social infrastructure, how it's being changed negatively or positively. But I think that Bonfire's got a great seat to be involved in what's going on in terms of investing in fun stuff and new people and different paradigms, I guess.
Mark, this is an incredible episode. I really enjoyed jamming
Sure.
with you and appreciate the insights. I am looking forward to our next conversation because I feel like I still have more questions for you, and you've just been awesome to learn from. So appreciate you coming in. For anyone that wants to like get in touch with you or Bonfire, like what's the best way to get into your world, your orbit?
We're coming out with a new website. We're going to have access to all of us through that website, through LinkedIn,
Cool.
et cetera. Yeah.
Bonfirevc.com. Cool.
Yeah.
Bonfirevc.com.
Yeah.
Mark Mullen, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sean Goldfaden from Coefficient Labs. This is Demo Day. Peace, guys. Thanks for tuning in to this segment of Demo Day. Check out our other podcast segments or listen to the full episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or at demoday.coefficientlabs.com. Peace, guys.